This week we are in Psalm 8, which showcases God's gloriousness in all of creation, man's frailty, as well as Christ's own fulfillment of Psalm 8. And it's here in this psalm we see that God has created all things, the sun, the moon, the stars, and our solar system, and the vastness of space, and that man, in comparison, is quite small. Who is man? He is frail, he is tiny, this being made of dust, a being who has also sinned against the Lord. Who is he that God would care for him? In fact, he's even made a little lower than the angels, and saying that man is not made immortal. He is gifted immortality, saying that man is not around in the throne room of God constantly praising the Lord like the angels. He is made lower than them. And that he is cared for by God because he is crowned with glory and honor. That is, that he is crowned with the image of God, that man is like God and that he is a rational being, a moral being, with free will. He has a soul. There's that spirit immaterial component to who man is. All mankind has that image. And then as Christians, we are in the image of God in knowledge, righteousness, and holiness, with dominion over the creatures. And of course, that image becomes broken in sin when we fall. The image is still there, but things don't work quite right. We don't reason quite right. Our morals aren't quite right. But in Christ, as he fulfills Psalm 8, as he fulfills God's law, he gives us his righteousness to make us more and more into his image. But more on that in a moment. Then the psalm ends, though, with the dominion, that last part of being in the image of God, that we have dominion over the creatures, really dominion over all things. And so man is given this dominion in his creation. King Adam in the Garden of Eden is given dominion. He uses that, though, to sin. He should have used his dominion to stomp the head of the serpent. Instead, he opts to believe the serpent. And so in this we see that God is great, man is small even in comparison to creation, and then even in his own frailty and weakness, he sins against God. We would think God wouldn't care for him, and yet we know that God so loved the world that he sent his only Son. And so it is Jesus Christ, the Son of God, the second person of the Trinity, the one who created the angels, humbles himself by becoming lower than them and taking on human flesh and becoming a Son of Man himself. And it is Christ who lives the perfect life and then dies and is resurrected, becoming the perfect image of God. So that now the Spirit is giving us grace through the means of grace, word, prayer, and sacrament, to become like Christ, to restore what is lost. So as we read Psalm 8, we go, I don't really do that. I'm not really giving glory and honor to God in everything. And I've not taking proper dominion over all things. It is Christ that we find forgiveness, and in Christ that we find that we can begin to glorify God in these things. It is also that Christ in his resurrection, and this is a lot of what Paul focuses on when he reads Psalm 8, as well as Hebrews 2, but Paul talks about this in Ephesians 1 and in 1 Corinthians 15, that it is in the resurrection that Christ becomes the perfect image of God. It is in the resurrection that Christ takes dominion and all things are placed under his feet, including the serpent. It is in his resurrection that he stomps on the serpent's head, bringing salvation to his people, restoring them in his own image, so that they may be reconciled to the Lord, become godly, and then when Christ returns, we'll be made perfect and glorified with the same kind of glorified body he has, one who is taking our vile bodies and fashioning them into a spiritual, glorified body. And so Psalm 8, we see Christ fulfilling this and becoming lower than the angels himself, doing what man cannot do, and giving that to him, so that now the believer may glorify God with his reason, with his morality, with his will, with knowledge, righteousness, and holiness, that he may glorify God in having dominion over all things on the earth, because Christ has all things under his feet.